And joining me now is the host of Guelph Storm Hockey on Rogers TV, Trevor Prior. And Trevor, with the Storm going all in last year and winning the OHL championship for their efforts, you'd have to think that this year they'll be looking to restock with some prospects in the OHL draft.
Well, they will, and first, thanks for having me. It's still kind of like I'm still trying to process how life is right now, and then that this is how we have to discuss Guelph Storm Hockey and Rogers TV. But it's the way it is. Um, what a year! Even though it was cut short, what a year this team had. Surprised a lot of people by how well they did. Um, and I guess the one downside of that is they're going to pick later in the draft than maybe what you thought. But you know, it's hard. I think I guess I caution Storm fans that I think next year might be the tough year. If you just kind of look on paper to who who graduates by age, there's potential for overagers, some of them to return, but who graduates and then who's going to replace those goal scoring, who's going to stop those pucks, who's going to defend the blue line. It's fairly young and fairly inexperienced, but that's also the evolution of junior hockey. Someone's going to step up and get better next year, and someone's going to step up and score more goals. So it'll be exciting to see that. So that's it with this draft coming up. I mean, it's you know, obviously you want kids that you draft to like step in and make an impact. I think everybody does. I don't think you quite see it a lot because you're dealing with mostly 16-year-olds, sometimes 17-year-olds coming in right away. Um, and maybe those top high end ones that go first in the draft, they can make an impact. We see Shane Wright in Kingston. He kind of did that, but that's why he's exceptional. I even think back maybe Robbie Fabry was probably the last Guelph Storm rookie that kind of came in and was somewhat impactful as a rookie. So they got to add, and I think it's been simple. They got to find elements to improve every area of uh, of the of their game, offense, defense, and maybe even goaltending. We can talk about that later. Um, but that's very cliche to say they need to add everywhere. But um, I think when I look at it, I think you kind of try to project next year's going to be a rebuild year. Who you draft this year may not make an impact for next year. You're kind of looking for guys that'll make an impact the following year when this team starts to build something again. Um, and that all said, my key area I looked at when I look at the roster, Neil, and I see who's back and maybe who's even leaving after next year, and I want to see a nice, skilled offensive. And he could be defensive too. A good, solid, high-end defenseman is what I'm sort of targeting because I look at the roster next year. There's a lot of bodies back. So I think they have six D-men returning. Um, Daniel Chayka might be the one star out of that group, right? So I think another kind of offensive defenseman that can learn next year and be an impact the following year is what I would be looking at if I was picking in the draft here.
The big question this year was what would the Storm do at the trade deadline? Of course, they mostly stood pat, electing not to trade Nico Dawes, Cam Hillis, or Pavel Gogolev, who might have brought in some more draft picks. Did you like what they did there at the trade deadline?
Well, if we knew the season was getting canceled, we've got to trade everybody because they're not going to play out. I know that's not a fair assessment. Um, no, I liked what they did because I liked that. The bonus was the Marcus Phillips. To me, that was a huge bonus. They recouped some draft picks from the London Knights. That was bonus material. They got the Liam Howell trade earlier in the year, the Anthony Popovich trade. They got draft picks. They were able to stockpile somewhat, and I was a big fan of just sort of letting this team play out. And maybe they could have traded one or two more guys and got more assets, but then you send the sign like we're giving up on this year. And Storm fans, I know you pay good money to come to a Storm game, but we want two more second rounders. So we're gonna make this team weaker. So I like that they were able to stay pat with the team, and it's so disappointing because I don't know if they would have got out of the first round, Neil. I like to think they would have at least made it 6 or 7 games possibly in the first round, and I still think there was a chance. As we sort of saw Nico Dawes kind of coming back to form after this kind of whirlwind of 2 months he had and an injury. Uh, Gosh, I would have liked to have seen him with an elevated game in the playoffs in that first round and see. I think it would not have surprised me if they won the first round, albeit it would have been a bit of an upset though.
The man who will be making the decisions for the Storm is GM and head coach George Burnett. From what you've seen of him over his time in Guelph, what do you expect from him in this OHL draft?
Well, he'll just say we're looking to get better in all facets, right? I think every coach. I don't know. It's after the D man, you got so many forwards that turn over and replace. Um, the one thing I did notice, a lot of all the forwards coming back, they all hover around 6 feet. Bakanov was the really one that stood over 6 feet. I kind of shrug a little bit when you look at the list and go, oh, he's 6 feet. That guy's 6 feet, eh? Uh, so maybe he looks for a bit of size too. I had that third in my list of things. Second being just skill forward for sure. But one thing I did notice was maybe a bit of size too in the forward department, just because we saw that last year in the 2019 run, you know, the size helped in Entwistle, Ratcliffe, Schnarr, just big body forwards. I think really helped. Now, ironically, when I was thinking of this argument of bigger bodies, the last two championship runs, basically the MVPs for the Storm were Nick Suzuki and Robbie Fabry, very small skill forwards. So that kind of minimizes my argument, but I think those forwards were surrounded with big bodies, and it allowed them to be very skilled because you had bigger guys to do, say, some of the grunt work in the corners. And albeit those big guys they had last year were also skilled as well. So maybe that's how you win a championship. Now those are high draft pick guys, and you only have so many high picks. But I like maybe a bit of size to answer your question. Going back to what would George be looking for a bit, but because everybody's looking for skill, I don't know if they would target a bit more size in the later rounds just to try to get the size of the team up a little bit.
You mentioned earlier that we should come back to goaltending, so let's do that now.
Yeah.
How do you see the situation in the Storm crease?
Well, I mean, first of all, the toughest job for men and women is to scout these 14, 15-year-old kids and tell me which one's going to be a good goalie, maybe which one's going to be a good forward in the OHL. I don't know which one's going to be a good goalie. Owen Bennett, I think they got their guy moving forward here. I think he was just probably mentally more just kind of running out of steam. They asked a lot, and maybe too much for a rookie goalie this year, but they were forced to. With Nico Dawes gone at the World Juniors and some injury. So I like this draft to me is not so critical for goaltending because I think you're just looking. I feel like every team usually drafts one or two every year, hoping one of them sticks. I think you're looking at a kid that will replace Owen Bennett down the road. And so the backtracking, I mean, I think we count on Nico Dawes probably turning pro, but you never know with what team picks him and signs him. They may send him back to OA to get some more experience just playing. But I would think George Burnett would also be looking to move that then at the deadline. So maybe a rookie goalie comes in, but I'm thinking more next year. You address Owen Bennett's partner with an overage veteran, sort of just a steady Eddie goalie that can play 30, 40 games depending on how Bennett does. Because I don't think they should just throw Owen Bennett here. If Dawes is gone, you're going to be the number one guy and play 50 games this year. It might be he can earn that. He can definitely earn it. But I don't know if I want to expect that going into training camp. So, but I think they address that in a trade. Usually, overage goalies aren't too expensive to acquire. We even saw that with Popovich, and he was an OHL champion. So if they can find a veteran goalie to help Bennett this year, and then perhaps if you draft a 16-year-old goalie, he plays either midget or I like when they play like Tier 2 Junior A, Junior B somewhere, and play lots of games there as a 16-year-old versus coming to sit on the bench in the OHL. and then you have him as a 17-year-old, and you have Bennett as a 19-year-old a couple of years down the road, and that's how I sort of look at the goalie situation in this year's draft. Not so urgent to find the next guy necessarily, but obviously you try to address that maybe in mid to later rounds.
Trevor, you get to interview lots of these young players and see their transition to the Storm. What's that jump like to the OHL once they've been drafted?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. I mean, uh, I like I like the idea if they don't sort of fully make the team the first year after they're drafted. The Storm does a good job at getting them in, at least getting them called up once or twice. Some of them maybe get 10, 12 games, depending on guys that go away to pro camps or injuries or World Juniors. So they do a good job. So I think that really gets the young guys' feet wet, kind of see how the OHL operates, kind of meet a few of the guys. But then there's the 16-year-olds, usually the first, second rounders that they're right on the team, and it's funny, we kind of see it every year because unless you're Ryan Merkley and drafted right away, do you step in and play lots of minutes? And I guess there's another one. He had an impact in his first round, but first year as a rookie, but the team was so bad it was almost lost in the shuffle. But we saw in Danny Zhilkin, a classic example, later first round pick. Um, you don't notice him too much the early part in the year, other than the first shift where he scored his first goal. Then they kind of go off to the under 17 tournament. They get 30, 40 games under their belt. And then, like, I thought we saw a different Danny Zhilkin the last 20 games of the year. I mean, I got him marked as one of the guys to watch next year, even though his stats only end up being was it 7 goals, 8 assists in 60 games. It felt like the majority of that was pretty much after Christmas almost. And when we talked to him a couple of weeks before the season concluded there, he just had confidence. You could just tell you just need that time to, yeah, okay, I belong in this league. Like, I'm not overwhelmed. The shock and awe and the lights and the cameras, it's gone now. I just play, and so I think those young guys, they get, when you're highly scouted, you've been interviewed a lot already. You've probably been talked to. You probably have an agent already. So I think you're a little bit more prepared today than maybe years ago because you have the hype around you. So you're used to playing with a bit of that hype. And now it's just adapting, right? And that's adapting. I usually give those guys half a season, and then they all seem to kind of get comfortable here in the league.
So, Trevor, if it's April 5th, the day after the draft, what will it look like if the Storm have had success? What does a good day look like for them?
Whew. Well, that's I think if they got if the first couple 2 or 3 picks they select are in the lineup next year, because that, I think that just says they grabbed the right guys, right? Um, and then always, if you can find that one wild card kid in the 10th round that just kind of surprises you out of camp, maybe he doesn't end up playing a lot of minutes, but makes the team and he's like a 10th rounder. I mean, that's every team's wish, but I think that that will look successful. And to me, if they come out with a 16-year-old kid on defense that has some skill and looks kind of comfortable it might be on he could be on the second pairing next year, just based if he's skilled enough. That would be success for me. And then I think it's going to be a bit tough year, but then I thought last year was going to be a bit tough and they surprised us all. But I think it'll be a little tough year, but everyone's going to get a chance to become the next guy on this team, I think, this year, and that'll be exciting to watch.
Thanks so much for joining us, Trevor, and giving us some insight into the upcoming OHL draft.
You too. Thanks, Neil.